Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time, and we're going to start the meeting of the City of Ojai Arts Commission on Thursday, the 21st, sorry, my mistake. And we will start with the roll call, if you would please. James.
Okay, thank you. 1 second.
Vamp till ready.
Did you get my text, Linda?
I did.
Perfect. I'll give Commissioner Byrne a
You're
second here.
Hello.
Okay,
You're here already.
Okay, I'll start.
you made it in time for the roll call.
Commissioner Crowner,
Here.
Commissioner Byrne,
Here.
Commissioner Tosher, Commissioner Balderman,
Here.
Vice Chair Harmon,
Here.
and Chair Addison.
Here. And
Don't I get-
Commissioner
I missed somebody.
Golden.
Commissioner Golden.
It
Commissioner
should
Golden.
be
I think
noted
I'm here.
It should be noted that Commissioner Tosher did notify us in advance that she has a nasty virus, and we urged her not to come and spread germs amongst us all. So she is not here tonight with permission. Okay, let's move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Balderman, would you please lead us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation,
Under Trump.
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Now, we have multiple minutes to approve from the meetings of January 19th, February 16th, June 15th, and July 20th, and May 11th. And they've all been forwarded to you. And does anybody have any comments, questions, or emendations? Hearing none, I would be open to a movement to...
Hang on, not so fast. Does that also include the draft action minutes of the joint meeting, or are we going to do those separately?
Those were agendized separately.
Those were agendized, so we'll do that
Okay.
separately.
But the one comment, the July minutes were not included.
Oh, I'm
those,
sorry.
Those we
You had.
will bring at the next meeting.
Okay. A motion to accept the minutes as presented,
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Thank
We
you.
will move on to our items for this evening's discussion. The first of which is the budget, and unfortunately, we are still
Is
in...
point of order?
Yes?
Are we going to do the minutes of the second item there of the Joint Arts Commission? It's the second item under approval of minutes. There's two separate.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. Well, I did say the May 11th meeting, so that was included in the
All
motion.
right, so I have corrections for that. That's why I interrupted
All
and
right,
asked.
let's back up then, and what are your corrections for that?
All right, so, and I've discussed this with James, so if you can't follow along, neither could we. On page 2 of those minutes, I have requested that the sentence starting "Mr. Lochner noted" be deleted, and the following sentence, "the city attorney then noted," that both of those be deleted from that, because James and I agree it's very confusing, the way in which it was written in there. So that's the correction. And then in the following paragraph, we are suggesting that instead of saying "two proposed finishes," that we say "powder coating and paint finish," so it's very clear what we're talking about for someone who has no idea.
Good.
So those are my suggestions, and as I
Okay.
said, I went over it with James. So
Any
if that-
objections to those emendations? Okay, hearing
No.
none, we'll accept those. Okay, we move on. No, because we already had a motion in place, and this was just an amendment. Okay, the budget. We are still in, I wish I could remember the Shakespeare quote, but something like Tartar hell and limbo in terms of the budget, because the city council has yet to come to a conclusion on that. My understanding, it's going to be in early October that they'll make the decision. Is that correct, James?
Yes, October 10th is the goal, so it's scheduled for the 10th.
Okay, the 10th. So we should know at our October meeting, in fact, in advance of that, and as soon as we will know, we will notify you all, obviously. But we should know at that meeting and be able to either heave a sigh of relief if our budget requests are granted, or roll up our sleeves and cut and change and amend how we're going to spend whatever money is allocated. The question I have to you, James, is do we have that flexibility? If the budget, for example, is less than we proposed, do we as a commission have authority to shift and move monies around within our budget?
We've run that topic by the city manager and city attorney, and the consensus seems to be that we'd have that flexibility, but we'd have to come to council to have it, we can make the request and council would have to approve it.
So in other words, we have the authority to make a request. We don't have the authority to make changes.
Right, so we could prepare a staff report and present it to council.
Okay, so if necessary, then that's what we'll do.
Right.
And I suspect that there may be the need for some changes. I'm not sure, but straws in the wind suggest that. So be prepared for some considerable discussion then at the October meeting of the budget.
Okay.
All right, let's move on.
Chairman,
Question, yes.
which of our programs would be likely affected by this?
Well,
Grants?
I'm not really sure, but I think the grants might be affected. I think also the request we made for funding to complete the book project might be
Oh,
offended.
right.
The rack.
And the rack for the museum. I mean, those are all major expenses. So these are issues that we're going to have to deal with. Okay, I made an error. We have someone in the audience, and I'm not sure if Wendy wishes to speak to us in the public comment section. Okay.
You're here
Well,
about
it's nice to have you with us. Good to have you here. Wendy Barker, the Executive Director of the Ojai Valley Museum.
Hey, Wendy.
All right, let's move on to the Arts Grant Committee, and I know we have a report and a distribution of assignments. So Christine, are you going to
Yes.
make this report, or are you passing it off to some other member of your committee to make the report?
Well, the only member of my committee that could make this report probably isn't talking to me anymore after trying to help me organize these packets. And then the other one's homesick. So I guess I'll do it.
Okay.
This is a banner year for grants. There were a total of 12 grants that were turned in. And the
Applications,
amount.
that is. Applications, that is.
Applications for
Yes.
grants that were turned in. And for a total amount of $55,883. So the $25,000 that we've asked for would only allow us to do less than half of what's been asked for. So we certainly hope that we're going to get the full 25. You're going to get a packet now, and I'll wait till these are distributed, and then I'll walk you through this, because there's so many new people. That's Marcy's, it can stay there. This is Stuart's. Michael, this is yours.
I'd like to interject one issue as we do this.
Chris? Sure.
Given the fact that we
Bobby?
have requests for more funding than we requested of the council, and presuming that at most we'll only get that which we requested, I think at our meeting next month, we should grapple with the issue, and it's a fundamental policy issue, of whether we are going to approach the grant requests with the goal of spreading the money around, or whether we're going to prioritize the grants and grant the money to those that we think have the top priority. That's a question we've nibbled at over the years that I've been on the commission, and I would like us to make that a major, in fact, I will make that a major agenda item at our next meeting for our consideration. So as you look at these grants and review them, please consider them in terms of those two alternatives, one of which would be, as we have in recent years, spread the money amongst all of the applicants, and the other approach would be to prioritize the grant requests in order of what we think their value to the community will be, which has to be the number one value, and make a list of that priority ranking. If it comes to that, then we'll have to work out some way of voting or balloting to establish that. But that's for a discussion next time when we actually know what the budget is.
Okay, and certainly the Grants Committee would pipe in on that. All right, so if you want to open up your packet so that I can walk you through what's in here. You all have a cover sheet, and the cover sheet lets you know that you have a copy of every grant that was received. So you have a full packet of the 12 grants. On the top, and they usually are clipped together, are the grants that you have been assigned, and that grant is listed on that cover sheet as well. So hopefully it won't be too confusing. Some of you have 2 grants to look at. Some of us only have 1 grant to look at. I'm not going to read through this cover sheet, but if you're new to the commission, I think it's really important that you read every word of it, because it will really clarify and straighten out what your task is being assigned these grants. And the only thing I want to do right now is to go down to the very bottom where it says, "We ask that you." And I want to go to the second bullet there, and it says, "Call the grant writer to encourage an appearance at the Arts Commission meeting on October 19th. Thank you, James. So next meeting, the grant writers will be here and will be telling us about their individual grants. And keeping in mind what Michael said, it's at the following meeting in November that we decide what we're going to do. So we have a little time to hear each grant as it is either presented by the writer who's come before us, or as it might be presented by you because the writer didn't come before us. If that's your assigned grant, then you would be making the presentation for the writer, and we'd all be asking questions. That'll give us a lot of information that would in turn, I think, shed some light on what we want to do, whether we want to prioritize grants or spread the money around. I will tell you, historically, the feeling has always been to have as many grant writers receive money as possible. So that has always, in the past, doesn't mean it has to go forward that way, but the history of it, the past history of it was to try to get everybody who applied a little something to get them going, because they're seen as starter grants. So for what it's worth, you might want to keep the history in mind as well. Any questions about your packet? Bobby?
Unfortunately, I can't be here at that meeting.
I'm sorry?
I can't be here October 19th. So I can't be here to field questions to the applicant. Is there somebody else who wants to do that in my place, or what? How do we want to deal with that?
I think in the past, when the commissioner who's been in charge of those has been absent, all of us have just filled in as we could, because we're all reading all of them. It's really important that you read all of them, not just the one you're assigned. The one you're assigned to is the one that you really want to have a conversation on the phone with the grant writer if there's anything in there that's not clear.
Christine, she could also still follow through and do all the.
Oh, yeah, you should still follow
and
through
then make
on this sheet.
She could make a recommendation whether she thought that it was a thorough grant, right? Don't we usually always do that?
We say there, it's common for other commissioners to ask your opinion on the merits of the grant, but you're not expected to be an advocate for the grant or the grant writer, or an unadvocate, is that a word? For the grant or the grant writer. I don't know, because of the Brown Act, that you would be allowed to do that by email, but maybe one person you could communicate with, Michael as chair or Linda as vice chair, and let them know.
Or
You know,
with-
give
or
them
with-
your notes.
Or with Christine as the chair of the committee.
Or, yeah, but one of us wouldn't violate the Brown Act. You could do that. One of the 3 of us would be fine.
Yeah,
Or
you can
anybody,
communicate with
really.
one, yeah.
Stewart's on the grant committee, and so is Marcy, whoever you want to work with. And we'll take your
Okay.
notes.
But one other question. Am I right in remembering that there is a limit on the number of times that a grant can be awarded to someone?
There's a 3-year period that someone could apply for a grant in a row, 3 years in a row, and then they must take a year off.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So in your packet, your Arts Commission packet, James has very nicely included, and you might want to pull it and add it to your stack so you have it right there, but he's included the spreadsheet that shows who's been awarded grants
Right.
in the past year. So if you,
That was very
you
helpful.
can check. And we had those documents from Roger, so I passed them on to get them printed. So you can check, you can take that and check against that. We did not check when we put these into
Okay.
order. We just put them into order. It was
I asked,
It was quite a task that I told Stuart, would you meet me over in the conference room? It will only take about 15 or 20 minutes. Well, an hour and a half later, Stuart was saying, I'm never going to talk to you again, and I'm out of here. So it wasn't like that.
so I asked that question specifically because I noticed that Brian Berman has again applied for a grant, and I think he's had 3 in a row already, hasn't he? Or is this his third?
Okay, Bobby's already done the checking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then it's okay, and we're all right.
I think that he's been awarded 3 times.
In a row?
Yeah.
Is it 3 in a row?
Well, let's look on that sheet and see. We'll look in the sheet and see.
Okay, well, we'll check the
Make
sheet. It's
absolutely sure.
just,
And if it is, then that's
we'll
the
check the
report
sheet.
that she'll make
I don't
next.
think he had one last year.
yes, he
He
did.
did.
Yeah, he
Yes.
did. Yeah, yeah.
If they, who's got Brian's? You?
No, so Brian,
Who was assigned
Brian
Brian's?
is 3 years in a row.
Already?
Looks
Yes,
like
2015, 16, and 17.
Okay, so who
2015,
was
though, it
assigned
says
to Brian?
0. It says that he received
Oh,
0.
that's right, so he didn't get anything.
But he still applied, and
Yeah, but
and
that
it's,
doesn't matter.
that doesn't
Oh,
matter.
it's the awarding 3
Okay, it's
years in
the
a row.
award. All right, so he's good for this year then.
So that's Marcy Tosher, so he's good, he can do it again. All right, all right.
Okay.
If that happens, as you're looking at it and you check against that sheet, you all should check against that sheet, you need to call that grant writer and tell them. Does everybody hear that? Mm-hmm. You got that, Bobby and Michael?
Yeah.
Be sure you call that grant writer if you find out they're ineligible and let them know. And then please also let me know that you're doing that.
And Christine, you'll bring Marcy up to speed on all of this, right?
Absolutely. When she's well, I'll go over and deliver her
Okay.
packet. He's got a month to do that.
Yeah.
Any other questions from
I-
anybody?
I have a big one.
Linda's
Because
got a good one.
I've got Ojai Independence Day Committee celebration.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that is not an artistic, I mean, it's a great celebration, but to me, that is not, I mean, it would be like if Ojai Day came and applied for a grant. I just feel that that's kind of,
Yeah, and Stuart and I both made that comment when we were sorting it out, but if they've applied, then the job, I don't want to say duty, but the task is for you to read the grant through and to call the grant writer and to see if you can find out from the grant writer what it is that leads them to believe that this would be an arts grant. It may be they're asking for money for something. We have given money, for example, in the past for the peace part of Ojai Day, right?
The mandala?
No, not the mandala. I think that
We
was
gave
the
money
Brian
for their-
Berman
For
one.
their float.
For the
their
float.
float on the
Right,
grounds.
so it may we didn't want to just say it doesn't qualify. We wanted to give it to someone who would do due diligence, and then, of course, encourage that person to be here in October so that we can all ask that question. How do you see this fitting into an arts grant?
okay.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments?
I didn't pay any attention, I just,
Okay, we will move on then to the mentor program. Bobby Balderman, please.
Well, the mentor program has been completed. We had a very successful reception last Sunday, and it was wonderful because
that was me, I'm sorry.
we had 2 recipients from last year here, and one of them performed. She had written some music and performed it on a keyboard, and that was delightful. And then we had some wonderful presentations. Kirsten Hoy did some dramatic.
Oh, that was fantastic.
Oh, she was amazing. Yeah, she did some, I don't know, what do you call those? Monologues. And they were here with their families, and it was a crowded room, so it was all well-received, and I think it was a very successful program this year.
It was a good event.
Yeah.
Good event.
I'd like to commend Commissioner Balderman
what I was gonna
and
do.
Chair Addison for a beautifully produced event.
Yes.
I know what I'm talking about.
And I was going to do the same thing and say, thank you to this team for resurrecting it. I mean, we had a bad year last year, so that's good. It
Yeah,
went
gives
really
us
well.
a-
Thank you.
Yeah, it gives us a solid basis for continuing the program. A number of the artists who've participated have commented on Facebook about how much it meant to them to participate. And I think as crucial as anything as we go forward with this program is that we reach out to artists that we know and try and persuade them to apply to be mentors. And we want to have as much variety as possible. We lost one mentor this year because David Baker had an accident and couldn't participate. But we had a great range, and that, remember, is one of our criteria. So we need to reach out to people who we think would be valuable as mentors. For example, someone in television production,
Oh, wow.
someone in screenwriting. We haven't done that, but they're both, great resources in this community. And there are lots of other actors, too, who I think if we could persuade them to participate would enhance the program and draw students from the active theater program at Nordhoff and Villanova and Ojai Valley School particularly. But that is to come, so we'll do that in the months when it's appropriate. Yes, Linda?
And going along with that, I think it'd be great if everybody could put a word out for, if these people are thinking about becoming mentors, maybe they could cast their web for actual students that want
Student
to
applicants,
participate.
yes,
Because
yes.
sometimes I think that maybe that's the best way to go, because we've been beating bushes and we've had a little trouble with that, so
But
maybe,
the students said they did hear from the bulletin at Nordhoff.
yeah, so that's
I
good.
thought that was good.
But
And what I liked was listening to the kids, and if anybody ever doubted that city money shouldn't be spent on the mentor program, all they had to do is watch these kids.
Absolutely.
And see how much it empowered them.
Yeah,
And they'd know it was money well spent.
yeah,
agreed.
yeah, agreed.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, anything else on the mentor program? And many thanks to Bobby. She shepherded this and bird-dogged it and made it happen in every sense of the word.
Thank you, Bobby. Sorry, I was at the beach.
Yeah,
The only thing
James?
we were going to mention is we've received one or two of the closing reports, but we haven't received the rest.
Okay.
So we'll need to follow up on
That's
that.
because way back when we first assigned who the mentors and mentees were, we told them they had till the middle of October to get the reports in.
Ah, okay.
And so I was hoping when I get back, I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. When I get back, I'll send out another reminder. So hopefully we get them then.
great.
You might want to put a plug in too for the show that's still up here and at the museum of the show.
No, I'll,
No, I mean
No.
for the.
no,
viewing
it's
audience.
going to come down on the 29th, and I'm not going to even be here,
Well,
so.
I know, but I mean, people in the audience, if they might be interested in.
Oh, you
coming
mean
in.
right now? Put a plug.
Our
Yes.
vast television audience.
Yeah.
I thought you meant a
For
plug
that
for them to
wide
pick up
audience
their
that
work.
No, I meant. for
Okay,
them
yeah,
to
the
come
work,
see
we have work
some work here.
right here, yeah, we have the glass work, we have Amy Lynn Stevenson up there, and we have some work down the hall. If anybody wants to come and see it, it's very inspiring to see what they've done. And at the museum,
Work at
and
the
we have work at the museum,
We have
too.
Stephen Edwards, Vera Long, and
Amy
Amy Lynn Stevenson
Stevenson,
at
yeah.
the museum.
Which is another example of how wonderful that liaison with the museum is. That's really
Yes.
a great way to expand the reach of the Arts Commission and programs like this.
It's a great credit for those artists to be able to say, I was in a museum.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Not a
That
small
too.
thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's all good stuff.
Okay, let's move on to the Public Art Committee, and we have 5 minutes for that report.
Good, that'll take just about 5 minutes. So on August 18th, the Public Art Committee met to consider Doug Lochner's request for an additional $8,000 of funding for the museum gates. So we received testimony from museum representatives and from Mr. Lochner. And at the end of that, the Public Art Committee found that we could not support the museum's additional funding request. And the committee noted that the artist had been apprised of a budget of $20,000 for the two gates from the onset of the project, and also at the joint meeting when the Committee to Approve Public Art had approved the redesign. And it was also noted that at the joint meeting, that same joint meeting, both the museum representatives and the artists were advised that the project was being recommended for $20,000 only, and that the museum had not contacted the city for additional funding until after the joint meeting happened. So we recommended at that meeting, the Public Art Committee, that we come back to you to see, because you have to put the final stamp of approval on it, that the project go forward as approved at the joint meeting with CAPA and the Historical Preservation Commission. That meeting happened on May 11th for the amount of $20,000, and that any additional funding request by the artist be the responsibility of the Ojai Valley Museum. So we have a couple of motions to that effect, but before we go to the motions, we would certainly welcome any questions, and I know that Marcy's not here, but if Michael wants to add anything or answer the questions, he is very well spoken on this matter and does a tremendous job of explaining how we came to our conclusion. So does anyone have any questions for
Yeah.
Michael or for me?
I do too.
You want to go ahead?
Okay. Chris?
So if since the additional funding isn't being approved, will the gates be able to be produced for what the original budget was?
The intent is to pass that responsibility back to the museum and for them to work with the artist and either have the artist redesign the gates to fit within the $20,000 budget or raise the additional $8,000 privately or however they possibly can. Amongst the things that we have discussed that I think we'll be proposing tonight is that we recommend to the council that the museum be given until the end of this calendar year to raise that additional money, which gives them October, November, December to raise the additional funds. And our understanding is that the former chair of the museum board, Tony Thatcher, is going to request funding of the Ojai Civic Association. And our recommendation is that if that does in fact happen, that they have then 1 year to complete the gates with the $20,000 allocation from the city. So that will be the recommendation to deal with those issues.
So I just want to follow up on that question,
Yeah.
Linda, before you go. Because we actually did ask Mr. Lochner at the end of the Public Art Committee meeting, which was open to the public, and we did ask him at the end whether or not he would be willing to sign a contract for $20,000 for the gates, and he said no, that he could not do the design that the joint committee approved. He could not do that design for $20,000. Now, when Michael is talking about the museum figuring out a way to come up with this $8,000, that's one thing, and that's kind of neat and tidy. If they're able to do that, that's very, wrap it with a little bow. If, however, they ask the artist to go back and redesign the gates, that redesign will have to go through the HPC and the CAPA process again. So that's going to slow it down and take more time, which is why when and we haven't said these motions out loud, but we will when the discussion is over, that one of these motions includes giving the museum a lot of time to work with this artist. We think I guess I'm only going to speak for myself here. I believe that it's in everyone's best interest to keep Doug Lochner on board for this project and somehow make it work out if at all possible.
Okay, I have a
So
question.
that's,
Linda?
Yes. Okay, I just need to know, it's an additional 8,000. Is the additional 8,000 required because of all the back and forth changes on the gates from what he originally designed with his one bid? And then we came back, or whoever came back, the Historic Preservation, had to redesign it because they weren't happy with it. And that's going to cost him more to produce. Is that the situation, or is that not accurate?
No, I think that is accurate, and I think we were convinced that, in fact, the design that he came up with for this second design would take more material, but more importantly, it would take more labor and time because of the nature of the design. So again, that it seemed to us was an issue that should have been taken into account when he knew that he had a $20,000 budget. So it seems to us perfectly legitimate, given this design that is, as Christine says, has been approved and gone through this rather elaborate process of the HPC and CAPA, it's legitimate that would cost an additional $8,000. But our feeling is that that should have been taken into account, and therefore the city should not be held responsible for that.
Okay.
Any other
You
questions?
look like you
or
have a
comments?
follow-up question for that.
Yeah, what I'm thinking is, number one, they had a design, people were happy with the design. He gave them, worked it within the budget, it was going ahead, and then the Historic Preservation, from my understanding, objected to the design.
Correct.
So the museum and Doug and everybody else worked really hard to come up with a compromise. And now the compromise is getting waylaid because of an $8,000 shortfall. I do not believe in my heart that it's up to Doug or the museum to do this alone. I mean, if it's a citywide project and that's the way the city's looking at it, to me, I would feel okay with using some of our public arts budget to supplement the shortfall. I really don't think we need to delay this project any further. If we have the money in the bank, it's already been set aside for public art. I just think it's a big, I mean, we all know that it's been tough for nonprofits, and the museum is a nonprofit, and they're a valuable part of the community. And they're working with us to get a decent design for the gates. To me, I just feel like to pass the buck down to the museum to have to come up with this extra $8,000.
You're really doing a wonderful job of summarizing a lot of my misgivings about all of this, Linda, and I don't disagree with you. But when we looked at it, what we had to consider was that once the artist knew that his original design, and this is typical for public artists, that they are sent back to redesign if something isn't acceptable. And it certainly was known that this is a historic building and that it was going to go under Historical Preservation Commission I. So the first thing I want to say is that when the artist went back and redesigned, he did a design that cost more before he had an assurance that there was more money to do a design that would cost more. A design could be done for $20,000. He chose to do a more expensive design. So I had to consider that, because that to me was a factor, and I'm just going to speak for myself. Second thing which you brought up, which is a very important thing for all of us to understand, and that is the proper use of public art funds. Public art funds are not earmarked for a project that the city has taken on and has devoted capital improvement funds for. And I don't disagree with you, that the city might have some culpability in this because it never came through the correct process. It would be city funds that would be used from that same budget, from that same capital improvement fund budget. It would not be appropriate for the city to take money from our public art fund for a project that we never had anything to do with its inception or agreement that that's how we wanted to spend public art fund money. So we have to be very protective of the public art fund monies and make sure that they are going to be used as they were intended to be used, which is to make up for our granting waivers to private developers. We are ethically bound to do a piece of public art to replace what did not happen when we granted a waiver. So that money is not really there to use for that purpose, and it might be a little hard to see through that, but I've been working with this now for so many years and with the ordinance for so many years that I can guarantee you it would be inappropriate to take the money there. It would not be inappropriate in my mind to ask City Council to take the money from their funds, but we felt that the artist knew $20,000 was the budget, and the recommendation that we're making has to do with that fact. And it's not up to us to say to City Council, maybe you ought to cough up a little of this. That they could do that, but it shouldn't come from us to tell them to do that.
I agree with Vice Chair Harmon about this. When you're building a project, let's say you're doing a remodel on your home and your contractor says, this is what it's going to cost, but if you have a change order, it's going to go up cost. And that is not a moral problem of mine as the homeowner. It is my job to finish the project and to pay for it appropriately, because I chose for the the change order. I chose to make the change order. So I think it is very important. We need to finish this thing and define, maybe change the intention of the protocols, and ask City Council to help the museum and help us and get it done. Get it done.
Now, excuse
Christine?
my ignorance, but what about the Historical Preservation Committee? Do they have funds, since they're the ones that
No.
changed it? Oh.
No,
No,
they don't.
this funding came from I always forget what the fund is, James.
CIP fund, the capital
Yeah,
improvement
and
project.
the commitment on the part of the city was to fund these gates as security/art gates from that fund. So any money coming from the city should come from that fund. And the vote was not to recommend that. But you seven have the final vote on whether or not, how this motion goes forward. This is just a recommendation from three of us. So,
Christine.
Michael, do you want to speak to it?
No, I'd like to hear Christine first. She has a question.
So we're voting on, I want to be clear. So we're voting on, no, we don't think that
We're
that we
voting.
should ask the city for more money, or yes, or yes, we think that maybe we go to the city and ask for money? I'm not
We're
clear.
making a recommendation to the city council.
Okay,
And the recommendation will either be that we feel that the $20,000 was awarded, and that's the budget for the project from capital improvement funds, and we do not think it's justified to ask for additional funds beyond that amount. Or we could, if the majority of this commission feels that way, we could vote instead to ask the city council to add additional funding to this project from capital improvement funds. So we have those two
okay,
options.
okay.
I have to also say, it is a city building.
Correct, which is why capital improvement funds
It's-
were appropriate for
It's
that.
going to improve a city building. It's not like we're not going to get any benefit from the gates. We are getting a benefit from the gates. I think we should make this work. I think it'd be a mistake to step back from it.
I want to just comment on something that Stuart said, using his example of change orders. That really is, I think, where the issue was for us, was that there weren't change orders. It was very clear that the city was giving $20,000, and I know Wendy is here, and I think she made it very clear to the artist all along, when saying to him, we only have $20,000. Nevertheless, he came back and said, well, you made me redo it, and it's going to cost you more.
So is he some sort of criminal or something?
No, I'm just saying that
He's
is
an
what
artist.
happened.
You know,
And without having the funding, he came back with a more expensive design. So we were really looking at at what happened, and
Bobby, do you have any
It's a
questions
tough
or
one.
comments?
It is.
Okay.
it's a really tough one.
One thing,
James.
if I could just mention it too, is just, I kind of wanted to make sure you keep in mind that the budget discussion is going to be occurring on the same day, October 10th. So I see a few options. We could recommend what the Public Art Committee has recommended. You could recommend that the funding comes from the CIP. You could recommend the Public Art Fund option. But one thing I would just kind of, throw out there is that the budget discussion is going to occur that day. And so there may be some kind of impact to, different budgets based on what's recommended here.
Right.
And part of that discussion is going to be the Arts Commission budget, and those things too. So just to keep that in mind.
And I'd like to reinforce what Christine said about the Public Art Fund. The money is there, but the money is specifically generated by waivers from developers in lieu of their doing public art. And so the responsibility for those funds is to use those to initiate and complete public art projects. I don't think it would be appropriate in this case to take money from that fund.
Why not?
yeah, I don't understand.
This was a project that wasn't generated by us in lieu of a
Was that
private
done?
development that a waiver was granted for. This was a project that was initiated by city, and they felt it was important to use city capital improvement funds to complete this project. So,
No, not to complete it, to start it.
To start
well,
it.
no, it was never, it was never an initiation, $20,000. It was in fact, if you go back and you watch the meeting in 2015, which I did, the museum came forward and asked for $10,000. And city council said, well, we want you to do more than security gates. We'd like you to do art gates. We'd like to give you double that amount. We're going to give you 20. So it was, the budget for the project was $20,000. Now, the fact that HPC said you got to do the redesign, the artist did the redesign, he came up with a project that was 50% more than the $20,000 allocated, is really what the issue is. If everybody, not everybody, if the majority here agrees that, and I could justify for you why these gates cost more, because I looked into it and I did a whole lot of homework on it, and this design is more expensive. If this commission majority feels that the $8,000 is justified, my suggestion would be that we stick to we stick to the original idea, which is this is coming from, it's for the purpose of securing the museum, but it's art. It should come from the budget that originally it came from. And we can do that. We can
Can I say
we
something?
can make this motion and vote against it, and remove new motions. You can vote against the Public Art Committee recommendation, and you can make a new motion and ask the city council to cough up that $8,000 or half of that money. You could even do half from the museum, half from, I don't know. There's all kinds of ways of doing it, I think.
Linda?
I don't think because something has been funded, you say it's the complete budget. Lots of times, things come up, like you mentioned the house. The pergola was a joint project. The Libby Bowl was a joint project. It's not like we don't have a president for joint projects. I just don't think we have to be so narrow. I think it's public art. I mean, I thought it was public art from the very beginning. That's why I didn't understand really why it didn't come through public art, but it didn't. So I feel okay about if the city thinks budget's tight and we have this money that's been set aside for public art and we have a project ready to go that needs to get done, I think it's perfectly fine for us to spend that money for it's public art. That's what they commissioned it for.
And I
it's
don't
for
think the
public
city,
art.
I do want to say that I don't think the city budget is tight. The bed tax at the inn has been exceptionally hearty. And I think that we'll not only get our budget, but I think that the cities might be in good stead.
Also, the only thing that does disturb me about using public art funds, because at first I was thinking, yes, why not? But I think it does set a bad precedent, that money is specifically for a certain purpose.
Exactly.
And if we make, no, but it didn't go through the public art process. And if we make an exception this time, then the feeling would be we could dip into this.
Dip in anytime.
I think the money should come from, what's that
Capital improvement.
right, capital improvements.
It's what it is.
Actually,
It's a capital
that's the motion
improvement to
that
a
I'm going to end
city-owned
up
building.
making. Yes.
It's a city-owned building, it's a
No,
capital
we
improvement
could
project.
finesse this whole issue by making our motion broader than perhaps we initially intended. If the motion was to applaud the design, the redesign, but recognize the fact that it should have, the second design for gates should have been cognizant of the $20,000 budget, but that as it wasn't, and as the new design has been approved by CAPA as an elegant public art addition to the museum, if the council chooses, we would not object to their funding the additional $8,000
I would be happy.
from the capital improvement
As long as
funds.
it's funded.
Well,
I think we should make it clear that the decision responsibility is the city council's.
Yes.
absolutely,
That it's up to them to decide
absolutely.
whether they wish to hold the museum to the mark, so to speak, and I don't mean to make that sound like a pejorative, but, or whether they feel that given the circumstances and the complexity and blah, 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 it would be okay to add an additional $8,000 or partial funding from capital improvement funds.
Now, I have one,
Does the council have enough background to make those judgments? That's
Oh,
kind of
they do.
they're going to,
complicated.
they're going to base their judgment on the report that we give to them. That's why we're here. They appoint us so that we are the ones saying, this is what happened, this is how it went, and this is so it's very important. I'm glad, Christine, that you saw the bigger picture here, that we do not encourage city council to dip their hand into the public art fund. That would be a huge precedent-setting error for us to make. And I also want to say that, because Linda said something that's very important, she said, I always thought it was an art project, and I don't understand why it didn't come before us. And really, in a very, for me, as I've stayed awake at night over this one, that really says it all. Because had it come to us, there would have been a request for proposals. We would have received proposals. That RFP would have had a budget amount in there, and an artist would have done it for the amount that was specified, and any orders to change. When we do a RFP, you do not give more money for a project. They have to work within the budget. That's understood by public artists. They don't get to come back and say, now I want more money to finish this. Once they are the ones that have been chosen by the committee to approve public art, in this case, it wouldn't have been that committee. It would have been a public art jury that would have included members of the Historical Preservation Commission, and none of this would have happened. So from that vantage point, I think that perhaps if anyone is going to cough up the 8, it should be the city, because it's the city that didn't follow protocol and send that project here.
Well, that's kind of what I was.
But I didn't think I'd be saying that tonight.
And I also think we should say again that if it had come up as an RFP and it wouldn't have had to been redesigned, but if it was redesigned and it requested more, if it would have, I mean, I don't want.
It just wouldn't have
Doug to
happened that
get
way.
the stick on
Would
this,
not have
yes.
happened that way.
Yeah.
No, and this isn't about, like I said a little earlier, I really believe, and I think that all of us believe, and the museum believes, that we want Doug to do this. And I talked for a lengthy period of time with Roger Conrad about, please help me understand why these gates are more expensive the second time around. And I will tell it to you in a nutshell. What Roger said was, you could have gates for $20,000 that would be acceptable to HPC, and it would be a Kia. But what you're getting for $28,000 is a Rolls Royce.
And they're going to be designed once. They're going to be a permanent part of our city.
And I
Not
mean,
something
talk
that's
about
gonna-
visibility, I
Yeah.
mean, there they are. So, I mean, I think we do have to strike down the motion that was in the packet, because that's part of Brown Act. So we have to vote on that and vote it down if that's what I'm hearing is going to happen. And then we would have to remove. Have I got that right, James?
Well, it actually sounded like it might just be an amendment. It sounded like
Can we do it that way?
maybe
Yeah.
adding the phrase, unless the council decides to increase funding from capital improvement funds, that,
I think if we just added that phrase as an amendment to the motion, that would make it clear that where the Committee on Public Art feels is a proper position to take, but at the same time, in essence, turn to the council and say, if you choose to do it differently by drawing further from public art funds, from capital improvement funds, rather, that would be acceptable. So I think we can give a more open-ended recommendation to the council that both preserves the integrity of the process as we have gone through it at length,
Oh, yeah.
and at the same time,
Real heartache.
sort of highlight the fact that none of this would have been necessary if indeed it had, in the first instance, come forward as a public art project. Then it would have
And the
been dealt
wording
with
will be in
differently.
there that we
Well, I
strongly think
I
that
think that
gates are
James has to read us back
Yes.
this motion before we vote on it.
Yes, let Linda finish.
I'm
Christine,
just saying that
please.
the wording would be in there that says you have researched the
Yeah.
costs and you feel that it's,
Well, I don't know, that's why I
Justifiable cost.
interrupted, because I would like James to work on the wording and read it back to us, so I don't know that would be in there. But are you getting that, what she said there, James, about including? Yeah. So, Michael, is this kind of like, in other words, that we're encouraging city council?
No, we're not encouraging them. What we're doing is we're saying, in our view, $20,000 was allocated, and the artist chose to create something that costs more than that. So it is not the responsibility of the city to cough up for that. But if the council disagrees and feels that the quality of the design as presented will enhance the building sufficiently, that they want to add capital improvement funds, it's up to them to do that.
Do we want the council's opinion on the on the quality of this design?
Yeah, I think
I don't
that's,
think
to
so.
me, that's the
I
opposite.
don't like that wording particularly.
Can I take a stab at this?
Then let me suggest this, that instead of trying to include all of the whys and wherefores in the motion, that we make the motion as straightforward as we have already, but either Christine or I, or both of us, will go to that city council meeting and give, because we would have 3 minutes in that case, a brief history of the project and our judgment of it in terms of the ultimate result will be a piece of work that both the Historic Preservation Committee and the Arts Commission and CAPA
Are in favor
all
of.
feel is viable and a distinguished piece of public art.
Well, I would like to put something else out on the table here in this case. And that is that, first, we read the motion that's in our packet and vote on it. And if it is voted down, that we remove that the majority of the Arts Commission members feel that the,
Well, let's
that-
finish.
hang on, let me finish my thought now.
All right.
That the majority of the Arts Commission members feel that, based on the review of the Historical Preservation Commission and CAPA, that the gates merit an additional $8,000, and that we're overriding the recommendation of the committee to approve public art, and would like to see the city council delegate an additional $8,000 from the capital improvement fund for this project. Now, that's too wordy, but that's, I think all those
like that.
points could be in there in some fashion. And then we strike down that motion from the committee to approve public art, so it's clean. And then we remove to ask city council to allocate the additional $8,000 based on that the design merits it.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, that we say the design merits.
Because that's what they want. They want our opinion. That's what they're going to ask. Do you feel, as the Arts Commission, that the gates are worth the additional $8,000? And we would be saying, yes, we do. And then, Michael and I still should come to that meeting, but we wouldn't do this during public comment, James. I would ask that we could give a briefing during this item, so that we can stand up and say, the committee to approve public art looked at it this way, the Arts Commission modified it and looked at it that way, so they understand that we struggled with this.
Yeah, you can bring up your concerns.
No, so
about
that would be my way of going about it.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yep, that is good.
Okay, so James, can you?
Everybody seems comfortable with that. James, could you read the motion as we have it at present?
So the present motion is that the Arts Commission approve the Public Art Committee's recommendation that the Museum Gates project go forward as approved at the joint meeting of CAPA and the HPC from May 11th, 2017, for the amount of $20,000 from the Capital Improvement Project budget, and that additional funding requested by the artist be the responsibility of the Ojai Valley Museum.
Okay, so that's the motion. So we need a second.
I second that motion.
So second by,
Okay, any further discussion on that motion?
okay. Can you do a roll
Who
call
was,
vote
who,
on that?
who was the first? Yeah.
Well, you made you read the motion,
Yeah,
so
but
you
I
can't
make it for
make
me.
I think Christine made the
Make
motion
it for me.
as chair of the committee.
Yeah,
But-
because I should have read
And
it.
s-
But why do we have to have the responsibility of the museum in there?
No, this is the motion that we're now going to vote on.
Okay.
Most of us probably are, I mean, I don't want to say that because I shouldn't.
This was the original
This is
This
the
was the
original
original
motion that you
motion.
want to get
Okay.
off the
Public
table.
Art Committee motion.
Okay.
So now we're going to do a roll call vote on that if there's no discussion, right? Okay.
Commissioner Crowner,
No.
Commissioner Byrne,
This is the motion that asks, that says you agree with the Public Art Committee not to give the additional money.
Oh, but then we're going to come back.
We're going to have another one.
Okay, so then I say, yes, I agree. Yes,
You agree that we should not give additional money.
yes. I
wait a minute.
agree.
Yes, you're voting no.
I agree.
so,
I agree that we should not give additional money, so,
so it's the responsibility of the museum is,
but that's what it says.
right,
Right.
and so that's what you're voting on.
Yes,
We're voting no.
I'm voting no, but it's up to you how you want to vote.
Let's continue the roll call vote, please.
Okay, yeah, let's, we'll continue.
an actual vote, though? I guess, so approve the Public Arts Committee recommendation, go forward as approved. Oh, yes, I want to vote no for this.
I knew
Sorry.
you wanted to vote no. That's okay.
I'm
I know.
sorry, I just need
It's
to read
very
it out
confusing.
loud.
It's okay, we,
Okay,
you know,
that's-
Commissioner,
Enough discussion.
This
Let's
is
continue
friendly.
the vote,
Commissioner
please.
Golden?
This is not a time for discussion.
No.
Commissioner Balderman,
No.
Co-Chair Harmon,
No,
and Chair Addison.
No.
Motion failed.
The motion has failed.
Okay,
Let's go, now we're going to go to the second motion because we want to get that off the table as well.
Don't interrupt me, please. Let us now go forward with a new motion, and let's discuss what points we want to be in that new motion, okay?
Point of order, Chair Addison. Before we do that, we have a second motion here in the minutes, and then we want to read that motion and vote no on that one as well,
Why?
because it won't make any sense. So the second motion is to consider, to recommend that City Council allow the Ojai Valley Museum to seek or raise funds through the end of this calendar year. And if they're unable to raise the funds, the Arts Commission begin the process of requesting proposals for the project. So we need a second on that motion. Okay, then we need a discussion on that?
Bobby Balderman seconds, and is there discussion on this motion? This is something that we'll have to fall back on if the motion to ask the city council to provide additional funds fails, which is why I think we should hold off
on that one.
discussing this until we voted on the other one.
But this is a motion from this committee that is attached to that first motion that we just
So
said
then
no
we
to. We'd have
probably
to
should.
redo a
Okay.
second motion on that.
Actually, just to clarify, the second was staff's recommendation to provide more time to the museum.
Right.
So it isn't necessarily part of the Public Art Committee's recommendation from the meeting.
Okay, let's go forward then.
So
and
even though it was here as part of the Brown Act public thing, we don't have to vote on it?
No, it's staff's recommendation.
Okay.
So we'll hold off on that then until after we.
All right, so then I'll withdraw that motion.
Okay, so we'll craft a motion now to deal with how we're going to present this to the city council. Would you like me to suggest some wording on this for us to start?
All right, I'm going to give it a stab. The Arts Commission moves,
It would be a recommendation. The
or
Arts Commission
recommends,
recommends to
the Arts Commission
council.
recommends that City Council grant an additional $8,000 from the capital improvement budget for the Museum Gate project, period, or comma, finding that the approved design by the HPC and the Kappa merits additional funding for labor and materials cost over and above $20,000.
You say the amount? You say the amount?
She did say the $8,000.
I did say the 8,
yeah.
didn't I? So James could read it back and you all could chime in and help with that now.
Yeah, I think that's good. And the only thing I would suggest is that we add a further clause with the proviso that if the city council decides not to allocate additional funds, that the museum have until January of 2018 to raise the additional funds, and that in either case, the gates must be completed by the end of calendar year 2018.
All right, I would, since I made, this motion wording, I think that should be totally separate from this motion and not attached to it.
Why?
Because it could be very, it would be confusing to me as a city council member, because on the one hand, it sounds like we're saying, we want you to give the money, and on the other hand, it's saying, but we don't think you will, or if you don't, then this will happen. I think if we're going to make this motion saying to city, we really want you to give this $8,000, that should be a clean motion for them to consider, and that you and I could be there at the meeting to answer any questions if they say no. That we then can say that we need to go back now and put some parameters on the museum raising the additional funds, because they would have to not only vote the motion down, vote our recommendation down, but they would have to talk about the museum being responsible for the, in other words, they would, let's say that I'm one of the city council members, I would be saying, no, I don't think it should come from our money, I think it should come from the museum. So I feel like we need to hear that first before we stand up and say, okay, do you want to put a timeline on that? Or that could be in the staff report, because the staff will do a report that goes with this.
The reason I suggested adding that to the motion is that then it offers the city council a very clear set of alternative paths that they can, and that in either case, there's a timeline attached. So the $20,000 is the figure, but the merit of the design is such that we would approve, or we would recommend that the city council consider adding an additional $8,000 from capital improvement funds. But if they choose, however, if they choose not to do that, that the museum be given until January of 2018. So it's an either or. It gives them very clear direction from us.
It gives them an out.
No, it doesn't.
No,
It
it
just gives
does.
them a very clear choice. Are they going to fund the money or not? And in either case, here's the deal for the $20,000. There's a timeline. And that should.
Cannot that be part of the staff report? That if because that's something that staff does, is write a report, so that there's the motion, and then there's a paragraph that says, if the council does not accept the recommendation from the Arts Commission, the Arts Commission recommends that this timeline. I wouldn't put it as part of the motion. I would put it as part of the
I would
report that
suggest that we
follows the
include it
motion.
in the motion rather than a separate report, because if it's in the motion, and if the council approves it, it will have the teeth of the council imperative. It's just in the staff report, there's no teeth to it. There's no imperative. Whereas if the council
I don't agree with
approves
you.
the recommendation,
I don't agree with
then it
you.
has
I go to
teeth.
city council meetings, and a
Well, so do we all,
recommendation
dear
like
heart.
that, it would definitely have teeth to it. I don't know, James, would it have any teeth to it?
Well, I hope so, but I guess it depends on the item and everything. But we could do it either way. We can include that as part of the staff report discussion. We can include it as part of the motion. I don't see an issue with either.
Well,
Any
I
thoughts
made a
from-
motion that did not include
Let's
that, and it
have
didn't
some
get seconded.
Let's have some discussion by other members of the commission about this issue. Anyone?
Did
Stuart?
anybody second that motion that I came up with, James?
Not yet.
That
We
was
haven't
part of the
started
discussion.
the
I-
motion. It's
yeah.
under discussion, which is what I'm calling for. Stuart?
I must say, your addition gives them an easy out. I agree with Christine. Yeah, I think it says, here's what we recommend, but if, but, you know, if you don't
you don't
like
wanna
it,
do
you know,
it.
we can do this. I think it's not good. Sorry.
Christine?
I think I agree with Christine and Stuart. I think it does give them an out. We want them to fund it, and we want them to fund it through the capital improvement funds. And they might think, well, we'll just won't approve it, and the museum can do the fundraising.
Linda?
I also agree with them, only because I think the staff report they give can include the
Yeah.
recommendation that it be completed. And I also think they're gonna do what they're gonna do. And if they're asking for our recommendations, I feel like we should give them our recommendation, which is to fund it.
Bobby?
Sorry, Michael, I'm with everybody else.
Okay, well, it's very clear. It's very clear. Let's strike all of that from the motion and read back the motion as it would be without that then, please, James.
Okay. Actually, so I strike that out. It's, so the motion would be that the Art Commission recommends that City Council grant an additional $8,000 from the CIP budget. Finding that the approved design by HPC and Kappa merits additional funding for labor and materials.
It's very simple. I like it.
Clean
Okay,
cut,
everybody
straightforward.
comfortable with that?
Bobby seconded.
Okay, Bobby seconds it. Any further discussion?
Need a first. Or was there a first? I think I missed a first.
I think Christine made
Oh,
the motion, which is appropriate as chair of the committee. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're done with that issue. Okay. Now,
Oh,
let us-
gee.
Please let us pass the other motion, which places a timeline on this, so that the city council also has an additional recommendation about the dates that are going to be involved. And I think in this case, given the fact that we're recommending, well, how do we phrase it then? Now, if they don't choose to add that money, do we need a motion that starts off by saying, if the council chooses not to fund this, it will be the museum's responsibility to complete it?
No, we don't want
That's up
that.
to them.
We don't want that. We simply want, if I understand what the majority here was going kind of in the direction of, would be that within the staff report would be, and James and I could work on this, some kind of recommendation to the effect of, I don't know if it even should be written in there at all. I really think it's a question of you and I coming to that meeting, or I come on my own to that meeting, and if they deny the $8,000, there certainly are going to be questions as to what's the next step. Because, again, I think that part of their discussion will be, we're not going to give it, we think the museum should come up with it. And I think it's city council's purview at that point to decide on a timeline for the museum to do that. So staff would have in its report a recommendation that a timeline is in place so that the Arts Commission knows if this deadline has passed, that they are starting a new public art process. I don't think we're the ones that tell city council what that timeline should be.
We're not telling them, we're recommending.
Well, or even recommending. I think that's their
But that's
thing.
precisely what we're doing, is we're recommending on this issue. In the motion that we just passed, we're making a recommendation. We're not telling them what to do. It's a recommendation.
I have a question. Would there be I mean, we were talking about putting him in the recommendation, would that be it would be take as much value, or be as much value as a motion, wouldn't it, if we put it in the recommendations?
Yeah, I was thinking that too. We can make it clear that the first recommendation is from the Arts Commission, and that's the motion y'all just made, and then we could have a second staff recommendation and note that it's at the Art Commission's direction, but in our phrase, but that the contract be finalized in a certain amount of time, and that we establish a timeline for the project as well.
Yeah, so that other thing isn't even mentioned, because it's like what Stuart was saying, it puts it right in front of them. Oh, there's an out here. We can tell the city, we can tell the museum they have until the end of the year, and then, it's all over. So I think that putting it in there does almost the same thing as attaching it to the motion, which none of us wanted when we went around.
But you're okay with the recommendation? what you just
Well,
said.
but his recommendation isn't mentioning a timeline. Say it again, James, because you said it so well.
Well, I actually was saying that that second recommendation would be
It's a
from
staff
staff, but it would say, it would recommend certain steps like
Contract,
the contract and the timeline for the
Yeah.
completion of the project.
Covered, right?
right.
Yeah, I don't think it'll have the same force or impact, but if that's what the
Yeah.
commission would
But
like to have
but
happen,
it's not
that's
saying that
fine
the
with me.
museum's responsible. It's just saying there has to be a contract by this.
Yeah,
Time.
we wouldn't be able to say that the art commission recommended it, so that obviously would reduce the impact
Yes.
to just staff, but.
Does that make sense?
However, if the council votes on it and they choose to put that timeline in place, it's still going to hold the same amount of teeth whether the Arts Commission had made the recommendation or
Right.
not. It's
Sure,
still coming
Right.
of course, if
absolutely.
the council actually votes on it.
Yeah.
But if they choose to just accept
Hail
the
Mary.
report and not make a decision, then it's in limbo again,
Yeah. I see
right?
what
And
you're
that's what
saying.
I'm concerned
He
about.
doesn't want it to stay on.
Because we've worked with this particular artist on another project, and timelines get pretty crazy. And what I'm concerned about is that happened with this project
Then we
as
should
well.
put it in a motion if that's how
So
you-
I would,
Well, what he said, what I heard you say, James, does put, that the contract be signed by a certain date, that there's a contract by the end of the year.
but that's a staff
Right.
report recommendation, it's not
The
the same
part,
thing.
the part that's missing is is saying the museum has to go get the money. It's taking that language out, because how did you say that, Stuart? It's like it puts it right in front of them. Oh, they can do that.
Gives
Yeah,
them an
but he
out.
isn't
It gives them an out.
You weren't doing that, though.
So I'd like to eliminate that part of it. You have all the rest of that in there, but not that part of it in there.
Any further discussion on this issue? Any other thoughts?
I just feel like if you're more comfortable putting it in a motion form, to say, whatever happens with the funding, we would like this gate to be completed within a proper timeline, and you can, whatever that is, to the end of 2018. Can we say it that way?
I don't know, what's the language that will be most appropriate, James?
My thinking is, assuming that motion one is or that the council takes the first recommendation, which is the additional funding, that the second motion would be that the Arts Commission recommend development of a timeline for completion, for contract and completion of the project, with maybe some dates for each of those things.
That would work fine for me.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah,
work fine.
Yeah.
With the
End
project,
of the year?
yeah, with the project to be completed by the conclusion of the 2018 calendar year.
So
So
two.
that would be my motion.
Yeah. So two dates in there. One, that the contract is signed by the end of this calendar year, and the second date being that the project is completed by
That's
the
good.
end of 2018.
That's good, yes.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
Works for me.
Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Crowner,
Yes.
Commissioner Byrne,
Yes.
Commissioner Golden,
Yes.
Commissioner Balderman, Co-Chair Harmon,
Yes.
and Chair Addison.
Yes. All right, let's move on to archival photography and put this baby to rest.
Oh, gee, well, thank you,
James,
everybody,
all
for,
goes to you now.
sometimes, I just want to say that sometimes it's so important that we have a robust discussion where every member of the Arts Commission is included, and that it isn't just a committee of three that is making decisions, but it does come back here for a reason, and that is that we learn a lot from listening to the input from everybody else. So I thank all of you for your patience and
Good
waiting. I think
discussion.
we've come to a good a good place with it.
That's fine.
Archival photos, I think James and I decided we're gonna,
Yeah, it was just a quick, really quick update, especially with how to get us back on schedule. But we're working on it. We're keeping it on here to keep us honest and keep us on it. And we're working on it, and we should have more, or we should be finalizing that in the next month.
Great.
Okay.
or maybe not quite that soon.
Well, some of it will depend
We'll
again
aim
on
for
the
the next
budget.
month.
Yeah. Okay, and you're up for the next one as well, James, which is the report on projects subject to public art requirements. Is
So
there
let me-
anything new there?
Yes. No, I didn't.
It's fun.
No problem.
Christine,
So
James.
on that list, you'll see the Ojai Valley Inn is the first item listed, the barn. We should have some news on that soon. So I'm hearing in the next couple of weeks, week or so, we should have some news on that. Short story on that is that it's the DRP was approved at Planning Commission and they're moving forward.
What do they want to do?
This is for the barn. They're going to build a new event center to replace their previous event center, which I've heard some different stories, but I guess they're not going to be able to use that anymore. And so,
I think it's okay if we can say what the total amount has come in of the project, not the valuation, but
yeah, so.
because there's rumors out there, we set those straight.
Yeah, so we've gotten an idea of the valuation. We're still finalizing everything. It sounds like the building valuation for that project is expected to be around 3.6 million, which, so obviously we would get, the Public Art Fund would get,
No, I didn't mean that. I meant what the project is costing, because there was a
Oh.
rumor that it was an $18 million project. That's not
No,
true.
it's not true.
It's a under $6 million project, just so, that's all I meant.
yeah, okay, yeah.
Sorry, James.
Yeah, there was a rumor going around that the project had been valued already by the city for over $18 million, and it hasn't been valued. And
False.
I wish it was $18 million, but it's not. So we should be getting the final numbers soon, and those are realistic numbers that we're kind of throwing out there. So other than that, the 334 East Ojai project is going to Planning Commission for the design review and lot line adjustment. But the recent valuation on that shows that most likely it's going to be under 300,000. So that one most likely is not going to result under 300,000.
I'm surprised about that.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think maybe, well, yeah. I haven't gotten the final numbers yet, but I asked about it and I was told, oh yeah, it's not going to hit that.
They're using that building, they're not gonna, they're cleaners? Oh, I was thinking of a different one, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is the cleaners. This is the
Yeah,
cleaners.
it's the cleaner,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So most likely that one won't result in any public art funding there, or it won't be subject to public art, I'm sorry. You'll see several other projects that were under 300,000. The bike park is due to go to Planning Commission soon as well, so that one may update soon. And there is one other item of note. Let me look quickly. 601 Pearl Street. The status you'll see says pending submittal of final tract map to the city for approval before submitting for building permits. And so we think that's going to happen soon, and then we'll be able to get the valuation on that. And that's 9 townhomes, so we're obviously expecting that to be over the $300,000 minimum.
Sure.
And then also the very last item on there, which is funny, it's back to 2012. 412 Mallory, I'm hearing that one might move, or might get going, so we might hear something about that.
Keep hearing that.
Yeah.
That's also Becker, correct?
I think that one is, yeah.
Okay, so he knows our process really well, which is good. I have a question.
Our house,
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Troy Motor Court.
Right, gotcha.
I have a
Okay.
I have a question,
Had a question?
James,
Oh, yeah.
on this. I have to go back and find it, just a minute. No.
one positive thing I'll say while you're looking is the Inn's reached out several times recently and is excited
I've lost
to
it.
discuss their proposal, so.
I lost my question. I'll ask you later. Sorry.
Okay, good. Okay, Ms. Tosher is not with us this evening, so we'll postpone plaque discussion.
I have a
or do you
report from
something
Ms.
to report?
Tosher on the plaques,
Okay,
you know. I don't mind doing the chair part of this, Michael, since I am the chair of it. So the plaques, we have a couple of plaques in. We have one in for Seafresh, and we have one in for, what's the other private one that we have in? Seafresh, Topa Mountain Winery. Those plaques are here, and we are just in the throes of figuring out how we're going to get them mounted. And then I believe I heard today that we have one of the two plaques that's going to go at Libby Park, Amber. So we have one of those in, and we're waiting for another one. There was an issue that had to do with the size of the font that Doug Lochner chose for that, and Aswell couldn't do that small print, and so Amber found another place that could do that, so we're just waiting for that one. So we're hoping that we're going to get this finished in due short order. And thank you to Amber and everybody for following through. So that's Marcy's report.
okay.
And then the Public Art Fund, James.
One thing I just realized, the archival photos, I don't want to give the wrong impression on that. I realized I was referring to step one that we're working on. I know Christine's eyes got big. There's a lot of work left to do on that, so
Right.
so don't want to give the wrong impression on that. The Public Art Fund is included in your packet. A couple of changes this month. The date on there should have been 9/17/17. So it says it's item D-V.
I think it's towards the end.
Yeah, it's towards the end,
This thing.
after the long, gate report. So the two new items, so the Lizard Libby Park Art payment, the $27,850 was previously listed as pending. It's now been, it's not pending anymore. It's been paid. It dates back to May, but it just was finalized and everything. So there's a large debit this month. The other addition, I won't steal Christine Burns' thunder, but we sold a gallery piece, and so there's
Wonderful.
some money coming in.
That's
So,
good.
so those are the two changes.
Right.
Great.
And then under reports, receiving reports, I asked James if he would give us a very brief update and a delightful sort of story about the Trimpin Arch.
So so the if you all remember, we brought the Trimpin Arch project to the Arts Commission a few months back with some recommendations, and one of the recommendations was to add a security camera. And good news, bad news. The the good news is that it was a wise decision, and the bad news is we caught somebody on camera starting to vandalize the arch. But it was proved pretty valuable. About maybe 2 minutes into it, we saw him, called the police. The police went down and caught him in the act.
Excellent.
So at that point, he had just done pencil markings, and we were able to clean it up and everything. So it's proving its worth.
And when does he go to trial?
And is
You know, I didn't follow up. I should.
art what he was doing?
Right,
Maybe I should have let him keep going.
okay.
And we plan on having some more updates on the Trimpin Arch for you in hopefully the near future, because we have a committee that's going to get off the ground and started, and there's all kinds of interesting things that might happen around the arch and the entryway. During the Blues Festival, the arch was being used as a table for eating. So the stone pillars, and then, the arch comes up off of those. They were just very convenient for people to put down there, whatever it is they had bought and whatever. It wasn't the end of the world. It was very interactive, but at the same time, it's hard to identify it as art when the gate and the art are the same thing. So there's some interesting conversations going on about that. And
Food is art, you know.
yeah, food is art.
Right,
So
right.
anyway, so that's the end of the Public Art Committee report.
Okay, I have.
Thank you all for your patience.
I have one question to ask of staff. Do we have any listing yet of city-owned properties that could be leased to the, what's the full name of the Glasgow Foundation? I've forgotten. Carolyn Glasgow Foundation.
So I received the list from the Carolyn Glasgow Foundation actually today.
Oh, good, okay.
For that they had mentioned the list of 80 potential properties, and I'm working on comparing the APN. Their list and our list are both not super user-friendly, so I'm working on comparing the APNs of their sites to our sites and figuring out what the actual addresses are and kind of weeding
Great.
through that at this time.
Okay, I would suggest that when you do have clarity on that you forward that information to the Public Art Committee so that we can then, the committee that is, can enter into some discussion with the foundation about the prospect of their leasing land. And I think the other issue that Christine raised to me that we'll want to discuss is, if that happens, do we want to in any way be involved? Or would it just be a clean lease of land with conditions that they have to maintain it and provide insurance and such? Or do we want to try and stick our oar in and in some way get involved because it's public art on city land? So there's an issue for us to discuss, and that's probably something that the Public Art Committee should review and bring back to this table once we get closer.
Yeah, and I want to add to what you're saying. I'm so glad you brought that up, Michael, because over the last week, I've had to sit down with that ordinance again and read it line by line, and it turns out there's actually language for this situation in the ordinance, so that the
Good.
Public Art Committee will get together and we'll share that.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we'll move forward on that when we have further information. Excellent. Let's move on to the City Gallery Committee. Ms. Byrne, if you would, please.
Okay, well, right now, we did have a sale, and it did bring up a few issues, which James is going to be working on. One thing, we do want to make it easy for people to buy, because it does end up being proceeds back into the Public Art Fund. So we were going to find out about taxes and if there was a way for people to use their cards, because I don't know about anybody else, but I don't run around with a checkbook. The show up right now is the Mentor and Mentee show, and I've got to say it was just a joy to see the kids' work and the mentors' work. Commissioner Harmon and Commissioner Baldwin and I, Bobby and Linda, we met at my house and we juried the upcoming Ojai Open, What Ojai Means to Me show, which is going to be our first open show. And emails will be going out to the people who entered, and I was actually going to talk to Wendy tomorrow. The show, this show's going to come down, the new show's going to go up on September 30th. We do have 3 pieces for the museum. There are top votes. I could probably say them.
Not until you notify the
Yes,
others.
I won't say them. But it'll work out really well. I think you'll be very pleased. I know we are.
Did you get lots of submissions for that?
You know, considering that the only place that we promoted this on was our website and Facebook, I think we got really good entries. And I find it charming. It's a wide range of art skills, and
How many post offices do you have?
actually only one, believe it or not. But I found it very charming. That part of the entry was they had to say what Ojai means to them. And I love what people said and their view. That reception we are now going to have our receptions for the gallery here to be on the third Fridays to coincide with what's going on in Ojai. And that will be October 20th from 5 to 7. We are going to, oh, is it 5:30?
Yeah.
Then we'll do 5:30.
5:30 to 7:30 is what downtown.
Downtown.
Oh, good, I'm glad you told me that.
This is at the museum?
No, it's going to be here, but the museum's also open, and,
Oh, that's smart to do it the same day as the third Friday, yeah.
yes,
That's
and
great.
we'll get involved in that. And the date's October 20th. It's a Friday.
It's always the
5:30 to 7?
5:30 to 7:30.
Oh, thank you.
It's here.
And it's going to be here, but of course, we're going to be encouraging people to go to the museum. And so I hope that the synergy, and we will when Commissioner Balderman is feeling, after her surgery and everything, we will be working on next year's. But I also would like to talk to Wendy about that and see if maybe there's a few things we can have happening together. I think that's it.
Great. Thank you, thank you.
You didn't talk?
What?
Oh, that's not the PR committee, though. You're on this gallery.
Right, I'm on the, yeah, I know.
Okay, we move now to the Ojai Education Committee, which is Bobby Balderman.
Well, I have more good news. Believe it or not, everything is at the graphic artist. The photography is done, the text has gone through edits and has been reviewed by a historian, and those edits are done. The book is half already designed and put together. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, I feel like, yeah, it's amazing. As far as the copyright use forms, I've gotten most of them back. However, I have one, and I don't know if this is the appropriate place to bring it up, but I'm in a conundrum of what to do about this one. The gentleman who has not returned the form, has not returned any of my calls, he hasn't returned any of the emails, and I had difficulty reaching him when I was trying to get the photography, but now he's just disappeared. And I don't know what else to do to try to get that form from him, because I'm just getting no response.
But you do have an email from him.
I have an email from him saying, here's the photos,
That's,
yeah.
I hope, sufficient. What do you think, James?
Can you send me the email? And then another offer I'd make is you can give me his information. I'll try to get a hold of him. I don't know
Yeah.
if that would help.
Yeah, Mike, because the city is,
Yeah, I can-
the city is after him.
So we can try, we can run the email by the city attorney, see if he's satisfied, and then I can reach out in the meantime.
Okay.
Good.
And I
Okay.
have some forms to give back to you.
Okay, and since I'm going to take advantage of this, and Wendy, we still don't have anything from the museum, so if we can get, the form was sent to you, and I know you were gone for a while, but we've never gotten it back signed. So if we could get that from you. And then we only have one other person, and I've been in touch with her, and she's aware that she's got to get it to me. She's just hasn't done that yet. But other than that, I think we're going to make that I'm going to make that January deadline. And Carlos is very aware of it, and he's been just a champion. He's working really hard to do it. Yeah,
Well,
so I'm very happy.
You've been a champion, too. This has been a Herculean project that you've driven through, and I think it's going to add luster to the work of the Art Commission. Christine?
Bobby, at some point, will we see like a draft or a?
I have been hesitating so far because the text was not finalized, and there's little tweaks that he has to fix. And I already had, as the graphic designer in me, I was already telling him, oh, please fix this and fix that. And he writes back, Bobby, I haven't fine-tuned it yet. And so, having been through that before with my clients, I know to prematurely release something is not a good idea. Let him
you're right.
let him get some of these little tweaks done, and then because once he does that, then it'll be legitimate to say, you didn't do this, or you didn't do that, or, I'd rather the loose ends all get pulled together, yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, it's all secret. It's just going to be a surprise. Yeah, so it is very exciting. Now, one last thing, I'm just keeping fingers crossed that on October 10th we get this approval, because Carlos, the graphic designer, his final payment comes out of that budget. And he's going to want to get paid as soon as he's finished here, and that's coming up soon, so yeah, we've really got to get that budget approved, at least to cover him anyway,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we'll keep our fingers crossed. I'm not going to say any more. Okay, that's very good news. That's very exciting news. Yes, please.
And to show we are so official, we even have an ISBN number.
Whoa.
Bravo, bravo. Okay, public relations, Ms. Byrne.
Well, we were supposed to have a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I canceled it because it was 109 degrees, and we were going to meet at the coffee place, and I really didn't feel like holding it. But besides that, so we started our Facebook page. I don't remember how many likes we have, but it's going really well. As a matter of fact, James told me that the other James thought that there was something going on with our website because there was so many hits on it. So the Facebook page is helping drive
Good.
people to our website. I'm
Website,
really
great.
hoping everybody here who is on Facebook, when you're watching TV, take the time to invite your friends to like the page. Right, but I'm just, it really helps.
Okay.
And I'm hoping for it to be a lot of the center of information for what's coming out. Yeah. So I think that's it. We're sailing along.
All right.
Yes, but I didn't think that was, is that something we should talk about?
So the question was about, we were talking about possibly setting up an Ojai Arts email.
Like
We're working
info?
on it. I don't have anything to report yet. but-
Okay. And the reason is it just seems to, especially for gallery kind of business, to have a personal email. It just,
Yeah.
it's, yes.
Put our email out there that much.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Acquisitions, Linda?
Right now, we're on a holding pattern until we find out about the budget, and we'll know what we can do and what we can't. So we're not doing anything right now.
And we're also in a holding pattern on awards, because our next venture will be to move forward with the next Lifetime Achievement Award. And we'll be doing that in the coming months. So until then, we have nothing to report.
Did you want to say anything about giving the Hope Fraser to John Slade?
Oh, that's right.
Oh, that's right.
You did it.
Thank you.
We did it. We should probably
We did
announce
do
it.
that, didn't we?
Did you report on
It's nice.
Yeah.
it's really nice.
Yeah.
No, so the public can
I'm sorry,
hear
I
it.
didn't
Yeah.
report on that, and I will. At the memorial for John Slade, at the Nordhoff Auditorium, I was one of the speakers, and at that occasion, I announced that the Art Commission had unanimously and sadly awarded the Hope Fraser Award to John, and I actually presented the plaque to Lori on that occasion. So that was a part of that ceremony. And I think that was really, really appropriate, too, that we did that. That was, that was such a loss. And that, man, that just reverberated through the community in a way that
Yeah, really.
reminds us of the fact that this community respects art and the artists. It was just another indication that art is central to this community.
And I just want to say that Michael was, just did such a beautiful job, and it was just so heartfelt. So thank you,
Well,
Michael.
he and I are in the same bag, after all, Shakespeare and such, so it was heartfelt, all right. Okay, staff liaison report. Do we have anything from either Amber or James? Amber, you've been remarkably quiet this evening. James?
I'll start, and I'll save Amber for last. Save the best for last. Just two really quick things, because we've talked about almost everything. So we've talked about it a lot, but just a reminder that the budget is going to be discussed on October 10th, and that'll include a discussion of the commission's budgets. And then, and also now the Gates recommendation will go that same day as well. And then just the second thing, the gallery sale, I don't think we mentioned, it was Diane Bennett's piece.
Yes.
And it was one of her on metal signs. I don't
Yes.
remember which one exactly, but just wanted to give her some credit for that.
Yes, yes.
Do you have anything?
I'm good.
Amber, you're good? Okay. I'll start off with the commissioner comments, if I may. I want to reiterate what Christine said, first of all, that the robust discussion on this gate issue was stimulating and appropriate, given the complexity of it.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
And the amount of time and energy that Christine and James particularly have spent on this, it merited that sort of discussion. I want to make a proposal. We will obviously be either popping champagne after the next meeting or cutting our wrists, depending on the budget. But we will certainly be discussing budget, and I think it will be important that in the budget, in the agenda next meeting, James, we include a discussion of the budget, obviously, whether or not we get it would be good to review what we've requested in each category. The other thing I want to do is suggest the following, that at the October and December meeting, or I'm sorry, the November and December meeting, I think it would be valuable for us to devote time when we come to the various committee reports to open the discussion to what that committee does, what it could do, what it should do, what it could do better, so that we have a general discussion to remind ourselves of what we're about and what's working and what isn't working. And I think that that would also be an opportunity for arts education, for example, to discuss possible subjects for the next book in the series, right? I mean, that's a subject that could be kicked around in the commission before it then goes back into the committee. I think the same thing might be true with public art. I think to have some discussions here at the commission level of where we should go, for example, with the public art fund that we have. What sort of project should we be investigating? Should we put out some RFPs with just general calls for proposals or specific proposals? But I think those sorts of things, and certainly the awards committee, is there another award that we should be granting every year on a regular basis, along with the lifetime achievement? The Hope Fraser is every couple of years. But again, so those are just examples of what I've been thinking about. So before the next meeting, I will meet with Linda and talk about this, and we'll sort of figure out which committees we want to discuss at each of those two meetings. And we'll give you plenty of heads-up time. And I think it'd be really useful then for the chairs of those committees to have meetings of the committees and to talk about this subject. You know, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? What should we be doing? What could we do better? What new things could we do? And especially that last, because I think that's been one of the strengths of the commission, is we've continually come up with new ways to support and invigorate the arts. And I think that really can be something that's sort of at the top of our list, so.
May I suggest that the
Yes.
commission include the adopted 5-year plan as part of that discussion?
That's a very good idea, and I think that needs to be sent out again, because the new members probably need
We'll
to
send
see
it out
that.
with the packet.
We have a 5-year plan that we were required to generate, and
And I think the 5 years is up and we have to
it
do a
may
new
well
five-year
be, and we
plan.
need to do a new
So
one.
maybe what
this
you're
is really
saying could be
appropriate.
all-
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
fold into that, yeah.
Yeah.
But it'll take a couple of months to do, because there's no point in rushing it. Okay,
Can I-
James?
One thing, just as a reminder, November is the month where the Arts Commission has the joint meeting with City Council.
Yes?
So in October, we're planning to include an item, if subject to your approval, of course, to discuss those talking points that you'd want to go
Sure.
over with
Sure.
the commission.
Aren't we doing grants too? Isn't grants part of the October also?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's gonna be a big meeting.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let's go around the room.
Just to
then for
answer
commission-
Linda
yeah.
a little more clearly, October is when people come talk to us. November is when we go through it and
Yeah.
Make
allocate.
decisions, yeah.
Hopefully, we have a budget by then to
Yeah.
know we
So
allocate.
we don't have an art commission meeting on the 16th. We're going to be on the 14th with city council. Is that correct?
We have a meeting, the date got dropped.
It's December, we have a party and stuff.
No, it says joint meeting, Arts Commission Council
In November.
in November.
Oh.
So then do we have our regular meeting as well?
Oh, yeah, we'll
Okay.
still, yeah, we
Okay,
still,
that's-
we still have our regular
That's what I
meeting.
was,
Yeah.
yes.
Joint meeting, I
14th
14th,
at 6.
And so,
it's that birthday cake.
yeah, so we'll include,
November?
we'll include a
Same
discussion of
week
that in
as
October.
our Arts Commission meeting.
Do you have the date,
Which,
the next meeting? Is it
November 19th.
It's a Tuesday
October?
night, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a Tuesday.
6:30.
6:30?
No, I think it's 6.
It's 6 for
Oh.
that joint meeting, isn't
6
it?
for
Oh,
joint meeting.
6, yes.
Six and a half over.
We noticed it says the next meeting is on October 1st. It's actually the 19th. The 9 just dropped out of
Yeah.
there. So the next Arts Commission meeting is October 19th.
Third Thursday as usual, yeah. Okay, let's go around the room for commissioner comments. Mr. Crowner, any comments?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, Ms. Byrne?
Are we allowed to promote things that we're involved with?
Sure.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'd like to talk about a couple of things. One is the Ojai Studio Artist Tour, and that is October 14th, 15th, and 16th, and a portion of the proceeds goes for student scholarships. I'm also involved in a plein air competition in Ventura, so we're going to paint plein air all week, and we have an exhibit that culminates in Art Walk, and I'm also in Art Walk. CMH sponsored a pod for me, so. Yes, in Ventura. I don't know if I'm allowed to, but yeah.
Sure you are, sure.
Okay,
It's arts.
yes.
Right.
That's it.
Christine?
Nothing.
Linda?
Nothing.
Bobby?
Nothing.
Anybody?
Michael,
No, I spoke already, I spoke.
I just finished a fabulous show which you missed.
Yes, yes, yes. The show that Stewart created, and it didn't just produce